and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today is day 24, the last day of my Crafter's Companion 2021 Advent Calendar series, and behind today's door we got this gorgeous 6x6 paper pad, and I actually I cut the actual Advent Calendar box so that I could create a little front and back cover for my paper pad because it didn't have anything. So I thought that creating a front and back cover using the actual Advent Calendar box would be a great way to remember where these papers came from. My first card is going to be a US A2 size card, so that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it's going to be a simple fold back card. Really easy, simple fold to create this. You just need to make your regular card base, and then on your front piece, your front cover or the front of your card, just fold that in half, score and fold that in half vertically. And you just want to fold the rightmost edge all the way back to the spine of your card or the fold of your card, and that's, I think, why they call it a fold back card. And I'm having to mess with my tape pen a little bit here. I'm not sure what I did, but somehow every time I roll some adhesive off of this tape pen, the little plastic band that is the carrier for the adhesive, it keeps on actually slipping off of the roller, and I've never experienced that before on a tape pen, so I don't know if it's me or if it's this particular tape pen, and but I eventually got it to work, and it worked out okay. So initially, I think I had mentioned in previous videos that I was going to today, with whatever came behind today's door, try to combine it with as much else from the previous 23 days and make sort of treat it as if it was, a single kit, or, make a flip video using all of the items in the Advent Calendar. But then I thought that I feel like every other day, I've really tried hard to focus on just the item behind that particular day's door, and I didn't want to cheat day 24 out of, I guess, having its time in the sun, so to speak. And so I decided that I would just try to do what I've been doing previously, which is to highlight what came behind today's door, and that is pattern papers, which I feel like is a really good challenge for me because I often struggle with using pattern papers, especially using or combining multiple pattern papers onto a single card. Often I'll just maybe use one, maybe use it more as a background piece as opposed to the star of the card. And so for today's cards that I'll be making, I'm focusing on trying to really make the pattern paper the star, and you can let me know how successful I was at it, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and I definitely feel like this is something that I want to challenge myself to do more of. This particular fold back style card is really great for pattern papers where you feel like, especially in the 6x6 scale, you feel like you don't want to chop into it. Like, you feel it all feels cohesive, and you want to display it in full, because at least width-wise, I only had to trim off 1/8 of an inch, and that is to accommodate even having some mats and layers behind the pattern paper. So if you didn't have the brown sort of matte layer, you could probably use the full 6-inch wide portion of that pink pattern paper. I did have to chop off the height of it a little bit, so I did lose a little bit of the pattern there, but otherwise, at least for the pink paper, I'm displaying quite a bit of it. And for my topper element in the center, I chose this section of the blue pattern paper, the teal pattern paper, to really showcase that bird and make him my star of this card. And I did want to add a sentiment, but again, I wanted the pattern paper to be the star, so I wanted to keep it small. And I found this really cute die, and I think it's part of the set of freebies that you get along with buying the Gemini machine. So when you buy the Gemini, there's an assortment of dies, embossing folders, and this was one of them. And I'm gonna take a smaller circle die from one of my nested circle die sets, and I die cut it out of the same light teal pattern paper so that there's good contrast between the sentiment and the background. That way you can actually, it's a little bit more legible, and it brings more of that pattern paper into the front of the card. And I did use another section of that light teal pattern paper on the inside fold. So you won't see it on the outside of the card while it's closed, but when you open it up, you see that splash of contrasting color, which I think works really, really well. And here, what I was initially intending on doing is, because I plan to hang the sentiment off of the circle topper, and that circle topper it's essentially 2 to 3 layers of cardstock. We've got the brown, the darker teal, and then the pattern paper. And I wanted this little sentiment to be level with the top of that. And so I just pulled out my Kalao 3D glue gel, because that way you can just push the glue gel down as far as you need to level that off. And so that completes my first card, which I thought was really fun. Might be my favorite, actually, out of the 3 that I create today. And this one, I wasn't filming for that first portion where I was fussy cutting, but this is basically, I think, the exact same design, but in a different colorway to the bird that I used on my first card. So instead of that light teal color, this one is in a pink colorway. And I just thought that it works so perfectly to have that be a focal image on my card, but I wanted to do something different to how I used it on my first card. So what I'm going to do is, I did already fussy cut that out, and I'm going to back it with this solid color cardstock that I'm going to just tear. This is a technique that I love seeing other people do it, but I've very, very rarely done it. I think I've only done it maybe once before. And I love that with the white core papers, you get this really nice contrast of that white showing through when you tear. And so I think that's gonna help to provide some extra contrast and really set our first paper apart from the second paper, which is the one that I'm going to cut down here. And I did pick the portion of this pattern paper that has that nice floral spray on the bottom right, because I thought that looked really nice. I'm trying to actually make sure that it's still visible once I get that top layer placed over top of it. And so I think part of using multiple pattern papers is being selective about the portion or the section of the pattern paper that you want to use, and highlighting those specific areas. I think that was one thing that I learned from this exercise, is looking at pattern papers as an overall pattern, but also as maybe singular elements from the larger pattern that you can actually highlight or call more attention to in different ways. And so on my first card, I just die cut out the element that I wanted to use. And here I'm just selectively either framing or cutting my papers down so that it preserves the elements that I want to highlight. And with this sort of distressed torn edge background, I feel like it's a technique that I want to do more of. I often prefer straight lines and die cut edges, and I think that every once in a while it's really nice to go with something that looks a little bit more distressed, and it's fun tearing into paper. I think that's the other aspect of it that's just joyful, is to just tear into that paper, and especially with white core paper like this, it's a really effective look, I think. And I decided that I wanted to go ahead and glue down this top piece rather than struggle with holding two pieces of loose paper and try while still trying to tear one, because I didn't want to get a super defined edge that precisely hugs the die cut pattern paper or the fussy cut pattern paper, but I did want it to look a little bit more. That's just me wanting things to look more uniform in a technique that's meant to be kind of loosey-goosey. So again, this is a technique that I don't do very often, so it's very out of the box for me. So I still have to fight that urge to make things line up perfectly, even when it probably would look better if they didn't. So here for my sentiment, I think this first die cut here, the Thanks die cut, it's left over from a previous card making session, but I decided I wanted to die cut it again because I have black cardstock from a variety of different places, but I found that some brands are very, very black, jet black, and others are more of a charcoal, they still call it black, but when I compare it against something that's like super duper black, it's really not. It's more of a dark charcoal gray, and that's what we have here. So I wanted something that was really, really super black, and so I chose to die cut this again, but I'll still use that previous die cut and just stack it. That way I get a little bit of dimension onto this card, and it makes this really thin die cut a little bit more sturdy. But what I was really going for was that really, really dark black, because there's the distressed edge behind it and a nice light paper, so I just wanted to increase the contrast between this and the background so that it's more legible, and I felt like having a darker black would achieve that, and the extra dimension also helps too. And I love these fancy fonts. I think it is called Fancy Font Sentiments from Crafter's Companion. Not only do you get the die for the larger sentiment, but each of these comes with a set of stamps that you can stamp out a sub-sentiment to go along with the word die too. I don't think I've used the stamps yet. I just really love these large words. And because that thanks sentiment is the only bit of black on this card, I decided that I would add some ebony black Nouveau drops in the corner, just so that we have at least one other element to make that not stand out so much. So onto my third and final card, and I will do something a little bit similar to the first card. So I am picking the area that I want to highlight on this particular pattern paper, and I know it seems wasteful to die cut into the pattern paper in this way, and it's probably why I've never done it all too often in the past, because I feel like I always want to use every inch of the pattern paper and make straight cuts. But I really feel like now, after this card making session, I have an appreciation for really highlighting areas of a particular pattern paper and cutting it down to just that area so that you can bring a lot of focus to it. And I think it's a super effective way of showcasing the pattern paper. I do have this bit of scrap pearlescent cardstock that I'm going to use as a shadow layer to my die cut pattern paper. And again, I'm going to use another piece of a different sheet, as this is how I would normally use pattern paper. It's more to fill the background, and with the particular pattern that I've chosen, it's really nice as a background piece because there actually isn't a focal image. It's just more of a solid, or not solid, but you can almost treat it like solid color paper because it's got a pattern, a repeating pattern throughout it. So so it does lend itself to being a background piece, and you can tell that my shadow layer die cut, there's a portion from one of the corners that's missing, which I was aware of, but I don't care too much about because that is going to, because it's going to be a shadow layer, it's going to be offset a little bit, so you won't even notice that there's that little bit that's missing. And one thing that I don't do, which is why I tried it this time, is to actually stamp onto my pattern paper. And so I chose this Sending Lots of Love sentiment stamp that we got in a previous day, and I'm gonna stamp right onto my pattern paper because these papers they don't have a coating on them. They are matte, and so you can stamp on them, and I'm actually going to be heat embossing onto this as well. So it takes to stamping really well, or it lends itself to being stamped on pretty well. Which means that you could probably, I don't know why I didn't think to do this, especially on the previous one, but you could probably ink the edges too if you wanted to maybe distress the edges a little bit. I just now stamped using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a pigment ink, so that stays wet longer than your dye inks or your quick drying inks, which means that you'll have some time to actually pour some embossing powder over it, and I just used some clear embossing. And so that's a way of not adding or changing the color of your ink, but it adds this nice glossy shine to it, and it has this very enamel finish as well. So for folks who are tactile, you know, when you rub your fingers over that area, you'll feel that sort of glossy enamel sentiment. And so I'll go ahead and just add this to the front of my card, and I think that it's sort of a cool way. I decided to offset it, but in hindsight, I don't know I think it might have looked better if I had centered it a little bit more. I'm not sure. I'm still going back and forth on that. But here's a final look at all three of my cards. This one I think is my favorite. It's where I've die cut out a portion of the pattern paper as a topper element. And there's still plenty of room to sign the card on the inside. This is my second card where I've just played with the technique of tearing your solid color cardstock, but your white core color cardstock, to create a distressed edge, and again combining a couple different pattern papers. And here is my final card, and the last thing I did was I just added some Ebony Nouveau drops throughout the card on this one as well, just so that my sentiment isn't the only thing that is black on that card. I hope that you enjoyed these cards and this series overall. I've had a blast, and I believe the Advent calendar is still available for purchase in some places, so hopefully you've picked it up and had fun crafting along with me. Thank you so much, and until my next video, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye!